Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we're going to be continuing our divisional outlooks for this next season. Super Bowl just happened, but we're already looking ahead to talking about these teams. Of course, we're going to talk about the draft picks that they have, all the assets that are possibly leaving in free agency, and then, of course, just how we could see them going up or down based on their cap space and everything that they have. We're doing this in order. So our first one was the AFC South because the Tennessee Titans are first on the clock right now on the clock. And then the second team behind them is the Cleveland Browns. So we're going to be talking about them and the rest of the AFC North today. So.
Yeah, and we're going to start it off with Cleveland Browns, probably one of the least optimistic teams that we're going to talk about the entire offseason. Sorry to Cleveland fans, but it just doesn't look good. You're starting off the offseason with your really expensive quarterback that has sucked since he was traded over there.
Yeah.
He retore his Achilles, which I don't remember an occasion where that happened from a quarterback perspective, but it sounds like he's going to miss the entire season on top of being paid one of the highest salaries. And then your all-time great defensive end requests a trade, 6 consecutive All-Pros, and now he doesn't want to be there. And all of a sudden ownership is like, no, we're going to keep him. It just already is just like, all right, this is how we're going to do it. And, you start off the year negative $30 million in cap space. And
the second overall pick.
And there's just not much optimism, especially because a lot of people are painting them as taking a quarterback, and it is one of the worst quarterback classes up top in recent memory. And, you got draft capital, at least. In terms of our tankathon trade value, draft capital chart, they're number one in the NFL in terms of their draft capital. They have the most picks, which is 12 at the very moment, and a lot of them in the top 100 that are really quality picks, including, second, 33rd, and 67. Can they do something with it? I mean, we've seen many Cleveland drafts where they have really reached on guys, and we'll just kind of see if they go about doing the same old.
Right.
Mayhem.
Some things to just, talk about. Jameis is a free agent, so not sure what you're going to do at quarterback either, like we were talking about there. They might take a quarterback in the draft. Nick Chubb is a free agent. Like, I just want everybody to look at the free agent list there.
It's a big list.
It's a big list, and it's guys that we, always thought were going to be good players. Jedrick Wills, first-round offensive tackle. Nick Chubb has been great. He tore his ACL. That changed his career a little bit. But
broke his leg broke his foot.
Broke his foot, right. And so, of course, that's tough. But Devin Bush was, one of the guys that everybody's like, oh, let's paint him as the next best, linebacker. And he, never made it out. So it's just there's a lot of a lot of talk and a lot of situations that are tough. And then you have Cleveland. And you're just like, I don't know what to do. Because really the best option is to get rid of Myles Garrett. Get rid of Denzel Ward. Get rid of
And I brought that up, last offseason at some point. Basically, you need to sell high while you can to help aid what is about to come, because it's an absolute shit show. If you were to release Deshaun Watson, and obviously there was some controversy and provisions of, when he retore his Achilles, can they recoup money?
Right.
Because it was offside and all that stuff, and who knows what controversy that will arise. But as of this moment, mathematically, if they released him or cut him entirely, it'd be $99.79 million in dead cap. Which, again, it'll be the third consecutive year that we set the record for most dead cap money. And this isn't the type of situation where, Denver can, really surprise people and turn it around in spite of that. But Myles Garrett right now, entering his age 29 season, he already requested a trade. So obviously he does not want to be there anymore. You don't really save anything by trading or cutting him. You're not going to cut him. But at the same time, this is the last time that you might be able to get at least 2 first-round picks, probably more than that.
Yeah.
And he's the only valuable asset that you could even recuperate close to that. Obviously, Denzel Ward is also a talented player, but he's also getting paid $24.53 million against the cap. So it's not like a lot of people are eager to take on his salary.
Mm-hmm.
But Myles Garrett being paid under $20 million as a cap hit is very enticing for teams that just need the one last piece to get over the hump. Think of what Detroit could do with a Myles Garrett or something of that nature. that was a team that I saw brought up, but it's in their best interest to move on, as bad as that sounds, but to paint a picture of trying to get out of this shit show, because it will be a shit show if you just remain as is. Yeah, that you have to do things to turn it around, and you won't do that unless you just completely strip it down to the bones and just start over.
Yeah, this is the lowest optimism we have for any team, I guess. 31st cap space, like we said, second overall pick. Those things normally don't go together, and so team's bad. Team's going to get worse with free agency. I mean, it's a really tough spot, and they also brought their head coach back. And I don't know that was the best choice, but also it's not like they could bring someone in and fix the problem. Right. So it's like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, like the bullet point says, it feels like dead man walking. Like, I don't know how you survive past this season, if that. But at the same time, if you brought in somebody else, it would just be for slaughter, and it just wouldn't be fair to that guy. We've seen that situation before with a couple of recent guys that just come in, get fired after a year. Houston, name is slipping, but before they brought in DeMeco Ryans, and they had to go through their year of just complete.
Right, yeah.
And obviously, there wasn't anything that was going to come of it. Dallas is going to do a similar thing this year.
Yeah, that's exactly why they brought him in.
We'll talk about how sad we're going to be.
I'm not sad.
Actually, I'm not either. I feel like the only way to just kind of right this ship is embarrassing Jerry Jones as much as possible, which is going to happen. But yeah, we'll get into them much later on. But yeah, with Cleveland, like I said, league worst scoring offense, by far worst turnover differential at -22. It's just they had one of the strongest rosters a couple of seasons ago. Everybody's kind of either aged out, way too many injuries. And I brought up Denzel Ward. He's one concussion away from retirement. Yeah, because he's had just piling up recently. He had 2 this year, if I remember correctly. Jedrick Wills, their starting left tackle, is gone, obviously. Quarterback situation bleak. It's just very sad. Yeah. The only thing to do is just hopefully they hit on the draft, because they do have the capital to do so. They obviously have a way even more than that if they got rid of Myles Garrett. I don't know if somebody would give a Khalil Mack as 3 first-round picks. You're a Raiders fan that traded away that player, but you had 5 first-round picks in the span of 2 years because of just completely stripping it down. Yeah. Didn't make the most of those opportunities. Right. But those are the type of ways to get out of bad situations, to completely turn it around. And that's really, like I said, the only way I feel like Cleveland can get out of this mess. Yeah, the only other players, none of them actually have value trading-wise, but like Jock, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a guy that I really like and hate to see, kind of get stuck here. Juwan Thornhill, Grant Delpit, both those guys in the back end, and then Jerry Jeudy had a great year. So he was one of their only bright spots, truly. Right. So it's just, I don't know what to do with this team. I feel bad for them. I don't feel bad for them. I think that the ownership sucks, and it's been bad for a very long time, and that's why it's called quarterback. It's where quarterbacks go to die and all that stuff. So there needs to be other changes, and it's not just the players. It's much higher up on the board, and that's where the changes need to happen. And again, we've been saying this for Cleveland since we've been born. Yeah, they've had small exceptions of seasons where they just kind of have a 10-win sneakily there. Mm-hmm. 2 seasons ago, out of nowhere, went 11-5. A lot of that was with Joe Flacco, and they had the number 1 overall defense. Obviously took a big step back this year, but had a lot of injuries and all that stuff. And on top of that, you can't rely on your starting quarterback or star quarterback to get hurt again. Yeah, for sure. You can't just be like, oh, yeah, we're just going to make it work. And obviously Jameis Winston won some fantasy money with us investing in him, or if you started him those few weeks. But at the same time, you're throwing 500 yards, but pick sixes, he just never figured it out. So it's not like he ever was doing anything to warrant, hey, maybe he's the guy to move forward. Right, yeah. He didn't make the plays. He didn't win the games. He didn't go out. He gave them a chance to win games, I guess, but in very elaborate, crazy ways. So going to the next team, because this is a very, very good, division overall. Cincinnati had the best quarterback in the league based on stats, the best receiver in the league, which we called out. Weren't expecting them to go 9-8 with it, but hey, one of the best running back
pickups in free agency for all for your leagues, your fantasy leagues in Chase Brown. So it was better than expected. There was just no defense really. So hopefully they can figure that out. Get some guys stopped. It's just they have some good stuff, and I'd expect them to be better than 9-8 next year.
Well, we'll see. A lot of times, like you look at having another 9-8 year and having basically all your own draft picks and having top 10 cap space, but at the same time, Cincinnati is notorious for not really investing in stuff, and when they do, it's really overpaying on guys that don't really deserve it or just don't pan out. I mean, they've tried
Sheldon Rankins.
Yeah, but I mean, doing the same contract for that when you had DJ Reader.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's why.
Or they've tried to invest in protecting Joe Burrow because he's been banged up, injury prone, and stuff like that, and it's just been failures with a lot of guys that they've invested in. It has not worked out, and then all of a sudden we have T. Higgins saga 2.0, whereas they franchise tagged him last year. They have the money to re-sign him, but at the same time you can't have your two of your four best players be receivers and have a complete winning roster. I don't remember the stats on my head, but the final four teams, I don't think there was a single guy, or there was one guy out of the top 25 receiving leaders this year that made the final four teams, and that was Terry McLaurin. Other than that, everybody else.
Not A.J. Brown. I'm surprised by that.
Well, he was banged up. He missed a couple games.
I thought you meant like I see what you're saying.
Total yards.
I see what you're saying.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you just can't rely on throwing for 5,000 yards because we saw like Drew Brees of the world, fan favorite around the Austin area, and just the way he plays, it was fun watching him play. But his peak years were when they were going 7-9 and 8-8. And, And it was just because they were like, all right, well, we're going to be really good on offense, but we're going to suck on defense. So we got to score 40 points every week. And that's kind of what it's becoming because Cincinnati, there was multiple games where they scored 35 points and they lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, that's just not a way to build a great team, great roster. They just need to really work on kind of getting depth because I think this is the worst depth roster, even including Cleveland. The thing is, they just have their quarterback figured out and the playmakers and stuff like that matter. But at the end of the day, I just don't really know if I have faith in ownership really investing because imagine a scenario where, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow are like, hey, we have the money to do it, and they know they have the money to do it because we have the access to the money that they have, and they don't do it anyways. And then all of a sudden, they just, instead of using that money to allocate it to other resources, and it's like, well, we didn't get you T, but we got you 3 starters on the defensive side of the ball, which
would be
we struggle
huge.
with all season.
Yeah.
But if they don't do that, and they just hold the money,
it would be
completely
different
story. That's going to cause some friction that really might not make this end too well because I guarantee you, if you lose either Jamar or Joe Burrow in the near future for some reason, shape, or form, the other one's going to
follow.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Offensive line and secondary is what I would invest in because there's just so many holes. I wouldn't consider anybody in their secondary a top half defensive player. And that's kind of the problem. I mean,
Mike Hilton was their lone bright spot. He's their free agent.
Yeah.
And so because he's a nickel and one of the better nickels in football, I expect them to be penny pinching and not
get him back.
Bringing him back.
Yeah. And then the O-line, it's just they just can't gel. That's the biggest thing to me. They just can't gel. Amarius Mims was a rookie this last year. He didn't have the best year at right tackle, but we said he was a project. Should not be playing, as early. Orlando Brown Jr. or is that? Orlando Brown's on the left side, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a below average tackle. So name value doesn't always mean anything, and getting some guys in there to help secure, saving your assets like Joe Burrow is kind of the trick in my personal opinion, along with getting some secondary help.
Exactly, and we just can't discount. Also, wanted to also bring up. You talked about Joe Burrow leading the league in passing yards and touchdowns. Jamar Chase Triple Crown.
Yeah.
Well, Trey Hendrickson led the league in sacks, and he was the other guy that requested a trade. He decided to play, and again, he played and balled out. He's not a pending free agent, but at the same time, if you don't continue to invest in him or the pieces around him, you lose your best defensive player, and then it looks even worse for a team that already is really ailing in that way. So I mean, typically this is just going to come down to how aggressive Cincinnati is going to be because back-to-back seasons going 9-8 after Super Bowl appearance and being the team or the guy that could actually dethrone and take out, go into Kansas City and play with Mahomes and Andy Reid and actually take him out on one of the two occasions that they did. All of a sudden now it's just like it suddenly feels like they've dropped to another tier below, the Baltimore Buffalo.
Yeah.
And I brought up in the AFC South video where it felt like Houston was in the tier of their own. Well, like I said, Cincinnati at the end of the day, you're in a tougher division, so you got to go above and beyond to not only get above those guys, but stay that way year in and year out.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. Just kind of like one team might have more talent, but it doesn't really mean anything if you have to play Baltimore twice a year, and those teams. So you kind of have to really think about that when you're going into a off season and being like, what do we need to, kind of counter those types of teams and stuff like that.
Yeah, and again, we talked last year about how tough the division's strength of schedule was and how Cincinnati was the one that wasn't in the top 5. Well, once again, Cincinnati has the easiest strength of schedule of the entire AFC North, and it's in the top half of the NFL. So it didn't help you last year. I don't know how much you can rely on that helping you turn it around either.
For sure. Let's go over to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was 10-7 last year, lost the wild card to Buffalo. And they are an interesting team because they have quarterback questions. We don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Russell Wilson was on his, free deal basically this year. And then you have Justin Fields in the waiting. I would have expected him to play more if he was going to be the guy. So I'm not sure what they're going to do. They do have a beautiful defense.
Yeah, they do. And it's not completely dominant like we've seen in years past, but it's still way above average in both areas and stuff like that. Their offensive line was absolutely decimated with injury last year, and as soon as this guy came back, the other two guys left and were injured. James Daniels is their best offensive lineman. He's a free agent, and he was lost for the year. And like you said, Justin Fields started out the year because of Russell Wilson's injury. He killed it, and we felt like he deserved to keep the job.
Yeah. And
it was very controversial when they moved to Russell. But then all of a sudden he ripped off like 4 or 5 straight wins, and it's like, oh, well, what are you going to do? But at the same time, at the end of the day, they end with a whimper, lost 5 straight. 4 of those games were by multiple possessions. And they were basically the exact team that we thought they would be, which is a competitive team. But they just won a couple more games to start the year. Because we saw the gauntlet of their schedule, and we were like, they're going to lose a lot of games at the end, which we were right about.
Yeah.
But, we just thought that they would drop a game or two to a Washington or a Giants or a Jets or a Raiders, and they kind of squeaked out a lot of those games early on. So that's what put them in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, Pittsburgh is not – they're in a weird spot because they're just too good to be bad.
Yeah.
And they just have too much stuff to just completely blow it out. But at the same time, it just feels like they're so much further down from the elite teams in the AFC. And I just brought up how Houston's kind of in the tier of their own, and Cincinnati's chasing that. Well, it doesn't even feel like Pittsburgh can even go up to that level. But at the same time, they do have a good coach. But somehow it just kind of always seems to fizzle out towards the end, which is a very interesting thing. And like you said, both quarterbacks are free agents. From what I've seen, it sounds like there's if the odds of them retaining one, it's more so leaning towards Justin Fields. But at the same time, you had both of them for minimum price last year. You won't get that luxury this year, and you have to outbid them or for them instead of have the being traded pennies on the dollar for them. So you're actually going to have to spend on them and then also invest in them and all around them. Their receiving room absolutely sucks. Every mock draft that you're going to read is going to pencil them in as picking a receiver. They typically don't even invest in first-round receivers. They're really good at picking second-round receivers or third-round receivers. On top of that, George Pickens, possible trade candidate. Yeah. Both running backs are restricted and unrestricted free agent, respectively. So completely just revamp skill group position is what's going to happen. So you need to really invest in a Justin Fields if you're going to actually move forward with him.
Yeah. I think that wide receiver, like you said, like getting a wide receiver makes sense. They did invest in Roman Wilson last year. He was injured for a lot of the year. Their other rookie and Oh my gosh, the left tackle. I'm blanking. From Washington, I can see his face. But he was also injured for most of the year. Why can't I think
Troy
of?
Fautanu.
Yeah, thank you.
He actually played on the right side this year.
Did he? Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because they had Dan Moore.
Yep.
But he's been injured, so it's just they have to get healthy and they have to retain, these edge rushers that they have and Highsmith and Watt. And then I don't know what's going to happen with Cam Hayward because the dude's old, but he is just kicking it. Yeah. Man, he is just good. Like, it doesn't matter how old he gets.
There's guys like Calais Campbell, Cam Jordan, and Cam Hayward that just kind of they're going to play until they don't feel like playing, and they're going to play elite as they continue to play.
Yeah.
He just had another excellent year. I'm pulling up his PFF grade because I believe, 90. He was first among all interior defensive linemen, 10 sacks, which I believe led everybody that was interior lineman as well. He's just really good.
Yeah.
That's a great, centerpiece for being 35 years old.
It's crazy, honestly. But yeah, so let me go over to the next slide so we can go through some of the bullets. But, there are a lot because it's just a situational team that has question marks that they have to figure out, and when they do, we'll know obviously pretty quickly what they want to change and how they want to do stuff. But quarterback starts as a start, and then probably getting one of these running backs. I don't know. Do you think they're going to bring both running backs back? Because I don't think Najee will be back.
I don't think they bring back either.
You don't think either will come back because of the class?
Even if they do, because like restricted free agent, you have the rights until somebody outpays and you don't feel like paying for them. I don't think because of the upcoming running back class, which we're going to talk about all spring and summer long, I don't think anybody's going to want to sign Jaylen Warren to any kind of multi-year deal that's too luxurious for Pittsburgh to match. So maybe they bring back Jaylen Warren, but I still expect them to invest in a running back.
That's what I was.
It would be really exciting because when I think of Pittsburgh, I think of just hard-nosed run game and then defense that just really grinds you down, and they win ugly every single time. Najee, one of the least successful 1,000-yard every year kind of running backs that I can remember, just because it doesn't feel like it's quality, it's just quantity. Mm-hmm. And he just is going to run for 55 yards every game. Doesn't wow you, but he's available.
Right.
But they just kind of need more from that position, and that's why I think they're just going to move on in a different direction.
What, you think they're going to invest in Caleb Johnson? Here it comes.
Yeah,
that's the guy. If you want that type of running back,
like a Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah, you could do that.
Interesting.
But
both of those are second round caliber.
Yeah, they could find him. What was their second round pick? Let me go look. I'm sorry. 52nd. So yeah, that's about the spot. But you could also wait till 83 and just get another different guy, Jaquez Hunter, whoever, because there's a bunch of guys in this class that we're going to talk about, and they're going to be falling. They're going to fall way too far based on talent, but it's just because they're so good, top to bottom in this class. Let's go over to the Baltimore Ravens, who did lose to also the Buffalo Bills. I think we've had that twice now, but Baltimore's interesting because we keep talking about them. They keep doing really well, and then they keep losing where they go. Like we talked about Houston on the last video, and Houston is like, oh, we're going to go to the second round of the playoffs and lose. And Baltimore's the same way, except for maybe they'll go an extra round.
Right.
It's really tough for me to get behind, what. Like I'm a fan of Baltimore and what they do, but it's like, how do you get better? How do you get over the hump? And right now, it's like they invested in receiver. They invested in secondary in their defense. They do every year. It's like I just don't know. Derrick Henry's brought in. Like, what are you supposed to do to beat the Bills and the Chiefs?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the question.
They just frustratingly feel like just same story, different year.
Yeah.
And they're just like on paper, top 3 talented team. This year they were just kind of dominant. They were one of the most dominant teams in the second half of the season, and it just ends with a dud where you're not playing in your element, and all of a sudden it's just like. And again, when I was very pessimistic about Derrick Henry, I just hate the stylistic approach of just like, we're going to ride this guy, but if we're trailing, he's not even on the field, and we're just going to rely on 7th or undrafted running back to catch passes instead of have Derrick Henry just back there as a threat for some reason.
Yeah.
They just chose to do that. And so when Lamar makes uncharacteristic turnovers that really flip the game script, all of a sudden you can't ride the guy that really rode you the entire season and got you to where you wanted to be. I actually thought about this because, there was a controversial decision with MVP and how Lamar ended up being first-team All-Pro, and then he didn't win the MVP. I think that's the best thing that could have happened for him. And the reason I say that, imagine him being a 3-time MVP. And then also being the guy that, still hasn't gotten over the hump because you let down in the biggest moments.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
He had a big game against Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
The year before he had his worst game of the year against Kansas City, he dominated Houston.
Yes.
Well, guess what? You're favored by 10-plus points in each of those games. So you being dominant, I'm not giving you props for that because you're supposed to do that. But when you are in a pick'em or you're, a slight dog, what are you going to do? And it's just like, at some point, we got to stop turning the ball over. People want to, Mark Andrews, heartbreaks for him because of his, drop fumble at the midfield and then dropping the 2-point conversion. You're not trailing from behind if Lamar takes care of the football.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
doesn't throw careless interceptions or literally puts the ball on the ground and has it returned by Von Miller for 40-plus yards to set up a score to be trailing by a touchdown or two the entire game. At some point, you being Lamar, I can't just rely on regular season results.
No, I completely agree with you. One thing, we go back and forth on all these guys, but like, what is the best course of action? Because I really loved what they did in the draft last year.
Absolutely.
They did a great job. They got, 2 of our favorite cornerbacks in the class in Nate Wiggins and then TJ Tampa. TJ Tampa hasn't played yet really, but Brandon Stevens and Tre'Davious White are both free agents, and I don't see them coming back because they do have the younger players. Defensive line, they've addressed. Roquan Smith came in. They picked up Away. So they have players. It's just, what can they do to go over the hump? Because, and I know I'm not the only one asking this, because like you're like, okay, well, what does Buffalo have to do to get over the hump? Well, Buffalo actually got worse prior season. Mm-hmm. Baltimore got better, and we were expecting them to play better, and then they couldn't even get past Buffalo.
Right.
So what do they have to do to just, get past that little bit? Because Ronnie Stanley's is a free agent. I don't see him coming back. I think they get someone else.
He's just dealt with way too many injuries.
Yeah.
And he did play all 17 games this past season, but something's got to give. Both of the left side of the offensive line will probably, in all likelihood, be departing. So addressing those areas. But they're another team that is usually aggressive when the areas that they're weak.
Right.
But it's just not in the way that you would want or expect because, once again, everybody's going to pencil them a receiver or, hey, they're going to trade for X, Y, or Z. And it's like, even if they do, they're not going to win you fantasy matchups because they're just going to throw that guy 5 times because that's what they want to do.
I love Zay. He's just not going to get the ball. And in some games, he'll get 10 targets.
Hollywood Brown.
Yeah.
Rashad Bateman finally, was catching touchdowns, but it was like 2 catches, 24 yards, and a touchdown, and that was his production. The second best receiver on that team is actually Isaiah Likely, who's not the top tight end on his team, which maybe it'll be interesting to see if they just kind of not prematurely, but sell a year early on a Mark Andrews after his, he had a real decline to start the year, ended up leading all tight ends and touchdowns because, of course. But, he's getting up there in age, and on top of that, he broke his leg the year before. Isaiah Likely is really stepping out of his shell. So, yeah, I know they like to run 2 tight end sets, but getting cheaper at that position maybe is a route they could surprisingly take. Who knows? But, again, like you said, they don't have many areas of weakness, and they're probably going to address it. But still, at the end of the day, I don't know if it'll be enough.
So I guess my biggest question is Lamar, is his style of play not good enough to win a Super Bowl? Because truly, that's kind of what it comes down to, in my opinion. Personally, I think that how he plays, if they get down, he can't figure out a way to get them back. When it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's bad. It's kind of how I feel like with Lamar's style of play. Right. Now, we can compare him to Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is actually a better passer than Lamar at in maybe not at this point in his career, but he will be.
He was at the point in which Lamar was a rookie compared to Jaden.
By far, not even close.
Yeah.
Similar upside as a runner, but Lamar takes off more and probably is a more athletic player. But is Lamar's style of play the problem, or is Lamar's mental the problem?
I hate just doing declarations like this guy will never do something, but it just doesn't feel like with the loaded AFC, and you're just like of the non-Mahomes group of talented quarterbacks, and the guys up top, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, other guys that are coming up. I just don't know if he'll ever do it in Baltimore. It's unfortunate to say. Maybe it's controversial, but until it happens, that's just kind of is what it is. Mm-hmm. Like you need to do it. Jalen Hurts was the guy that we've talked about. Like, hey, can his style get it done?
Right.
Because he's inconsistent, and tush push narrative, and all that stuff. Well, he shines bright when the Stars have, at least in the last 3 years, in the NFC Championship games and Super Bowls. He's actually outplayed Mahomes twice in Super Bowls, which not many quarterbacks can say that. So, Lamar, you need to do the same thing because we have you on this tier of things, and you were this close to being a 3-time MVP.
Yeah.
More MVPs than Mahomes. 3-0 for Josh Allen or Joe Burrow to this point, and you have had less results than all of those guys. So at the end of the day, something's got to give, and you have to come out on top. And I did like his message and how he wasn't frustrated, and at the end of the day, he's just like, he's tired of it, but he's not victim blaming or pointing fingers. He's like, he's sick of it, and maybe he drives that to where next year he doesn't give the ball away when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, until it happens, you'll always have those reservations. So when we do playoff predictions, that's going to be the biggest talking point because they might have the most talented roster, and it's just like, hey, can I trust this guy versus that guy?
Yeah, and that's what happened this year. And we had our conversation about, and we did a whole show on it, where you picked Baltimore and I picked Buffalo, and it was because I did not trust Lamar.
Right.
And it's crazy to say how I can't trust an MVP candidate. It's not like we're talking about, Trevor Lawrence right now, if he were to get to that point. CJ Stroud is inconsistent. We're talking about a 2-time MVP that I'm like, I'm not sure I can trust that guy. Like, that's the guy I should be able to trust, if anybody. So I don't know if it's what to do, basically. Like, I don't know how I could say, let's fix this franchise. It's not like it needs to be fixed. It has all of the right things. It just can't. They just can't win in those moments. And they don't pay. It's funny because Lamar and Mark Henry. Lamar and Derrick Henry. They were both first at their positions by PFF.
Right.
Like, they were great.
They were number 1 run defense, number 1 run offense. I don't know on the top of my head the last time or if that's ever been done before.
Yeah.
They were one of the top 3 fewest sacks allowed, one of the number 2 in sacks defensively. So not only are you above average, you are elite in so many areas that even if they don't really address these whole and say there is a slight downgrade to Ronnie Stanley, because you got Derrick Henry and freaking Lamar Jackson, it's going to be fine. I don't think that your left tackle being below average is going to hinder Lamar in any way the way he plays.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's the inaccurate passes, it's putting balls on the ground that you're not accustomed to. And there was narratives all year about his interceptions and how so few there were, but every single one was a tip ball or drop pass that landed in somebody's arms. Well, neither of those turnovers in the divisional round were, this guy ran the wrong route or, this was a misassignment. It was, no, you recovered from that and you did it anyway. So, but again, we can, we've gone way more over on that. But at the end of the day, Baltimore, you're talented. You're one of the best teams. But until that moment happens, those questions will always remain.
Find a way, please. Like, if I was a Baltimore fan, I'd be very frustrated and I'd ask a lot of questions about this type of stuff. So, but yeah, that's our AFC North video. That video is always going to be fun because we get to talk about some really good players: Joe Burrows, the Lamar Jacksons, Derrick Henrys, Jamar Chase, like the whole group. So very very fun video, and we're going to keep going. There's going to be 8 of these, 8 divisions, and then we're going to get into a bunch of draft stuff, and y'all are going to follow along because y'all love us, and we're going to be killing it this whole time around until the draft. We're going to kill the draft, and then we're going to kill fantasy, and you're going to make a lot of money.
Right.
So
yeah, we're doing the whole 9 yards. But yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Please go check out our other divisional videos if they're already out. We did our Super Bowl recap the other day as well to cap off the 2024 season. It was a blast. We had a whole lot of fun doing it, but now it's year 2, and we are officially underway in doing the new content for teams and draft season starting at the end of the month. We're getting out all the previews before then, but we'll have some mocks coming up soon, more interactive stuff, live streams, all that stuff. We have a lot planned, and it's going to be really, really exciting to get into year 2.
absolutely. So we appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and we'll see you on the next one.